when I look at this matchup, starting with Oregon, right? They got off to a slow start, and it was kind of a little bit of everything, right? Like 1 week, the offensive line wasn't able to push around somebody they were supposed to push around. The next week, the defensive line didn't show up, and they're in a game that's closer than what it should have been. Now, we have seen them against Boise State. I'm not saying they haven't played anybody, right? Michigan State, we got a lot of respect for Jonathan Smith. We know they're not personnel to where they can be effective enough yet. But this Oregon team is one of those that I does think have the personnel to be able to at least stalemate this Ohio State team, which I'm not sold on the offensive line yet, or at least not as sold as some other people are. And I'm not 100% sold on Will Howard being able to make great decisions all the time and be the winning difference in a close game. So I think Oregon has the capability. Where I worry about Oregon is I watched them, and I think I know Will Stein was there under Bo Nix, right? And I know Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix both played a lot of football. But it seems to me that Oregon gets too cute because they have Dylan Gabriel at times. If the run game is working, just pound the run game. Use Dylan Gabriel, right? He can keep plays alive. He can extend plays. You can sprint him out, and you can do all these things. But it seems like there's so much going on in the Oregon pass game that they kind of get flustered when other things aren't working, and we saw that a little bit against Michigan State. So I think Oregon can do it. I look at Ohio State, and I don't trust Will Howard, and I think he makes a couple key turnovers that they can't just out-personnel and out-talent this team like they did Iowa.
Okay, well, if you force me to take one of these two quarterbacks to build my team, obviously I'm going to take Dylan Gabriel. I've been a fan of his for a very long time. And then, so based on that premise, if you're saying, well, the rest of the rosters are still really, really good on both teams, then, you'd have to give the nod, and you throw on top of that Oregon is playing at home. I get that. But here's what I'm seeing right now. Both teams 5-0, so they've handled their business. In an era where we're seeing Alabama lose to Vanderbilt and we're seeing Ole Miss lose to Kentucky, just winning ugly games, same thing we said for Miami, handling your business puts you on top, right? But we've seen from both programs so far this year that they haven't looked great at times, even for successive quarters. I'm not talking about just a play here or there. There have been times where like, man, is this really the top 3 team that we thought they were going to be? I've said that same phrase for both teams at different points in the season. But if you told me that one of these teams is fraudulent, then I would take Oregon over the Buckeyes right now.
So you think Oregon would?
Maybe they're just dead even. Maybe they're just dead even, and they're in this like Spider-Man gift pointing at each other, and it's a mirror, and we end up getting a close game, and that's how the rest of the season plays out. I just feel like as an entire team right now, I would trust the Buckeyes a little bit more. I'm thinking 31-21 type game right here, even on the road playing Oregon.
Well, it's you would think it would be tied. I think the under in this game is probably the one of the best plays. I don't know what it's at.
52.5.
It's at 52.5. Blaine, if it gets to the point, and I think it will in this game, because I know how good of a motivator Dan Lanning is, I think he's going to have both sides of the line of scrimmage ready to play, including an offensive line that I think can move the ball on the ground with Jordan James, and then you know what Tez Johnson can do in the slot. You got Evan Stewart as well, who can do some things. I'm not worried about Oregon's athletes, but if it's going to come down to which quarterback can make those big time plays over and over again, and at the end of the game, do you lean more Will Howard or Gabriel? And if that's the case, how can you go Ohio State here if you lean that?
I would lean more to Dylan Gabriel. I think everybody would. But I think the difference is, to me, is I do think Ohio State is better up front on both sides of the football. I think
how much better, though?
I think better enough to make the easy things easy. I think it's going to be harder for Oregon to establish the line of scrimmage. I think it's going to be harder for Dylan Gabriel to turn around and get 4 to 5 yards. I think it's going to be easier for Ohio State when you have Henderson, when you have Quinshon Judkins, and the absolute electricness you have at receiver. If it comes down just to the quarterback, I'm going to lean Oregon because I think DG has done that before. But I like Ohio State's defense more from just an absolute personnel standpoint from your your starting 11. The only thing I do worry about when it comes to Ohio State, one, they haven't played anybody. The only common opponent right now, I believe, is Michigan State between both these teams. And I believe Ohio State won 38-7 and Oregon won 31-10. And you can dive into those numbers, but I just think there's a little bit more power. There's a little more electricity on the Ohio State side right now than I would think on Oregon. I mean, look at the receivers. I mean, we can talk about Ohio State every year with the receivers. It's not just 1 or 2. They got legit 4. They have a legit 2 running backs that can get it. If it comes down to the quarterback play, then yeah, you would lead Oregon, but I don't think it's going to come down to that. This is going to be a line of scrimmage football game. This is going to be a Big Ten line of scrimmage football game that Oregon is not used to yet, which I think there's a reason this game's 2.5, 3.5 points, but I think Ohio State is a more complete team to where they won't have to rely just on their quarterback to win this game.
Well, I disagree with you because one of the things we've sat here and said this whole time is Dan Lanning, and I think we've all echoed this, and I think this is what made the start from Oregon not being great on the line of scrimmage a little bit surprising to us, is that he's building an SEC-style team, right? The same reason we sit here and say, well, Utah, what they're doing translates, and why this works because they're physical up front. Dan Lanning is doing the same thing that Kyle Whittingham did at Utah, but he's doing it at Oregon, and I think he's got better athletes overall. So I think Oregon is ready to play this game up front. You look at the guys they got running around on that defensive line. They're not going to be smaller to the point where it's just a gravity thing against Ohio State and an overall talent thing. I think they're fast enough to keep this game not only close, but maybe even have a lead late. And I'm just telling you, I think Ohio State's turning the ball over way too much. Like, they're hitting a bunch of explosive plays, and they should, against the teams that they've played. But let's not act like they just looked like, it was an amazing performance against Iowa this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, look, Oregon could definitely win the football game if that's the point we're making, especially when they're at home. But there's a difference between making a point to assemble an SEC roster and then like playing like an SEC team on the field. I mean, Oregon got outrushed by Boise State 221-109, and you're about to face Quinshon Judkins, who came from the SEC, and you're going to face Henderson. And like one thing with Will Howard is we hadn't even really talked about his ability to run the football too. The more that he's able to affect the game in the run game, the less he has to win the game through the air. So if Boise State's rushing for 221 against you, I just feel like the Buckeyes are going to come in and do every bit of that. And Maddox Madsen, that game still threw for 148.
Yeah, and I think I get we say that, but then I go back to the Ohio State game against Akron when I watched Akron punk them for 2.5 quarters up front on the offensive line. So I get it. I understand. It's just I think both these teams are going to be playing at a very high level in this game, right? So the way I'm viewing it is if one team plays poorly and the other team plays good, whoever plays poorly is going to get beat, and they're probably going to get beat pretty badly. But I think Oregon's going to put their best foot forward. I think Ohio State's going to put their best foot forward in this game. The question becomes, again, if all's a stalemate and it's all equal, Oregon at home with Dylan Gabriel is why I think that they're a good pick on the money line and plus 4.5.
Yeah.
When I got it,
I don't think anybody's sitting there saying that's a bad.
But schematically, if you're Ohio State, if you're Ryan Day, David, and you've watched, how it's kind of, gone down with Will Howard, and you've seen some good and you've seen some bad, and you want to get in a rhythm. I mean, are you just going to take a page out of Michigan's playbook early in this game against Oregon, just see if you can line up and run it with the quarterback, with Judkins, with Henderson, maybe some 22 personnel where you got both of them in the game with Will Howard before you start taking shots to Jeremiah Smith and Egbuka? Or are you just going to do the balancing act as usual?
Well, I would just see what they give me first. I'm looking for Jeremiah Smith anytime that I can, and Egbuka for that matter. And the game against Akron, it still ended up being 52-6.
Oh, they murdered him at the end of the day.
And they rushed for 170. And that's why I say, like, I've seen this movie so much before. Yeah. What did I tell you this weekend against Iowa? What did I say that it would be? I said it'd be 14-7. I was wrong. It was like 7-0.
Yeah.
And then they still win big at the end. I mean, I've seen this movie a bunch of times. So I don't know. In terms of, like, what's the best strategy to come out and whether it's, like, run heavy or pass heavy, what's Oregon going to give you? What's Oregon going to give you? Because they can only do so much. You can only double so many guys in the pass game, and you can only load up so much. I mean, you're talking about 22 personnel. Like, maybe you do put Travion Henderson and Judkins on the field at the same time. We saw Michigan do that a little bit.
That's what I get worried with this Ohio State team. One, Chip Kelly's a phenomenal coordinator. He's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But I do feel like sometimes Chip Kelly gets too cute. And play calling. You go back to that Iowa game. Look, I get it. Will Howard can run, but you have two of the best backs in the country.
It's 4th and 1. Give
sitting
the ball
back there. It's 4th and 1. You come out empty and you run it with Will Howard. You can't get cute in this football game. Oregon is too good of a football team to get cute. So I'm really interested on third down play calling, 4th down play calling, how Chip approaches this, and how the coordinator from Oregon approaches it.
Well, and because Will Stein, he's got a lot of good stuff. Their pass game, especially the short to intermediate, is really good. I brought up Tez Johnson and what he can do in the slot and the way they use him, and Jordan James coming on, and obviously, they got a guy who's basically a Travis Kelce clone at tight end. You watch him run around. He looks very similar to him, plays very similar. But on the other side, Blaine, if I'm Oregon going against this Ohio State defense, right? Push comes to shove, right? And again, you got to look at what personnel grouping's out there. Is it 11? Is it 12? Are they going heavy and you match that, whether you mug the safeties or bring in heavier personnel? But if everything's even, I've got to make Will Howard, right, beat me early.
For sure.
Even if I got to give a little bit of cushion on the outside
100%.
of Jeremiah Smith in them, but I've got to make Will Howard beat me through the air at some point.
If there's anything you can trust when it comes to this Oregon team and this Oregon game, they're going to make Will Howard beat them. And I'm not.
Well, what did Iowa do? We said what Iowa was going to do.
I'm not going to let these two other guys beat me. And they have the receivers to do that, obviously. But I am interested in how Oregon's going to approach this from an offensive standpoint. How many RPOs are you going to see this game from Oregon? How many deep shots early are you going to see from either of these teams? Because remember, this game is on the road at Oregon, so I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State does take a deep shot. Because if I ever have number 4 one-on-one on the outside, buddy, that's a matchup that I like. I don't care who's on the other side. So it's going to be interesting. It's not only the players in this game, it's where it is. It's at Oregon. How is the plays being called in certain situations? And I go back to what I said earlier. As good as Ohio State has looked this year and they have rolled everybody, they do have some weaknesses on third down, and that's what I'm interested to see how DG and the OC take advantage.
Yeah, well, we know how important third down is. Just has Alabama.
What about fourth down in this one?
True.
We talk about Dan Lanning every year on fourth down. Like, will this game end up coming down to the couple fourth downs that the coaches decide to go for or not go for?
I
wouldn't
like the
be
Washington
surprised.
game has for the past couple of years. I mean, probably. I just and you talk about Heisman moments, and we say, is there an elite team in college football? Well, these next 3-4 weeks, and I mean throughout the rest of the season. Hey, YouTube, what's up? If you don't mind, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, turn that notification bell on. It's going to get crazy here if we've entered the halfway point of college football season. We appreciate you being here.